Hi, welcome back to the Busy Corner. It's lesson 36, and I want to take a minute to talk a little bit about what does S-twist and Z-twist mean in a yarn, and how does it affect your knitting, and what to do about it. Now, sometimes you'll see a little graphic, just like this. So, a Z-twist yarn has been spun once, and it's usually single ply roving, and it's been spun clockwise, and it's usually the first spinning. If you're doing your own spinning, then it would be the first ply of maybe a 2, 3, 4 ply yarn. Or it's how roving is sold. So one of the cowls that I'm going to do in the next video, the herringbone cowl done in the round, is made with a yarn called Malabrigo, I think. And it is a Z-twist, single ply roving, beautiful merino yarn. And this is also made with a roving type yarn, and they're both Z-twist yarns. So they've been spun once, and the spin is clockwise. And if you could look at the yarn up close, you would see that the spin is going uphill. And I think that probably is showing up on camera. Usually, though, yarn is sold in the S-twist, which means it's been plied, and the original, for instance, this is a 4-ply yarn. And so each of these plies, when they were spun individually, were spun clockwise. And when they were put together, they were spun counterclockwise. And so if you could see that yarn up close, and I think the camera will capture that, you would see that the twist is moving from the right to the left and going uphill. Therefore, the moniker S-twist yarn. Well, this can be problematic as you're working with yarn. Most yarn that's meant to be used by hand, yarn and thread, is spun with an S-twist yarn. But people still have problems with it at times when they're knitting with needles, because the yarn gets twisted. So depending on the pattern or how you hold your yarn, you might find that your yarn is becoming twisted up too tight, or it might be untwisting. Now, when I made the herringbone cowls for the next video, my yarn was actually untwisting when it was the plied yarns. So these were both made with Lion brand yarns, and they are plied yarns. And I found that in order to keep it from untwisting, I had to put it on the floor, the yarn itself, on the right side of my body. And just that action of putting it on the right seemed to help. And people who knit with knitting needles will say, well, if your yarn's twisting up too much or too little, try just switching your hands. Instead of knitting continental, knit English or something like that, or rewind your ball. So even though I couldn't find a lot of information, I tried to just glean what I could off the internet, and found that by taking my roving, because the roving was a nightmare, it just kept twisting tighter and tighter and tighter. And I tried everything. I even took out this wooden Lazy Susan I have, put it on the floor, and I put my yarn on top of it in a bin and would spin it to try to get the extra twist out. Now, I found that I needed the Lazy Susan only on occasion when I put the yarn on the right side of my body, in a bin on the floor, and had the yarn wound counterclockwise. So what you want to do, and with a center pull ball, so what you want to do with your roving, and I've had this problem with roving before, and I think from now on this is the way my approach is going to be. And that's going to be, take your yarn, and we'll assume for a moment that this is roving yarn, and what you want to do to counteract that tendency for it to over twist when you're doing the herringbone cowl in the next video, it will be lesson 37, is take your roving, and it will probably come as a skein, and that's what the Malabrigo yarn comes as, an unwound skein. And you're going to make it into a center pull ball that as you pull the yarn out, it will come out of the ball counterclockwise. Now, I'm going to show you on this, because you can make a little notch. This is just a cardboard tube. I actually used my biggest pipe because I wanted that to be as loose as possible on the inside as it came out of the center pull ball. But just take your end of your yarn and put it in your notch in your cardboard tube, and start about midway in your tube. And you want to wind the yarn counterclockwise. In other words, you want to wind it the same way away from you in counterclockwise that you want it to come out. of the ball itself for the roving. And once you've got it around there a few wraps, you can start twisting your, never twist your yarn tightly. You just want to wrap it. And when you're doing a center pull ball on a cardboard tube like this, and don't buy those those ball winders. They don't hold enough yarn for, fat yarn. I've looked at those, but they just don't hold enough. A cardboard tube works just as well. You want to be very loose about it, and keep turning your tube. Make sure you always have slack. This isn't a very good job. But once you have your yarn, and again, spun on there like that, and you take your, I didn't mean to do that. Where are you? Make sure you take it off the notch first. So that was a boo-boo. Okay, now when you pull your ball, it will come out of there in a counterclockwise motion. Make sure you take it out of the notch first before you pull it off the tube, or then it's coming out backwards. So I made a boo-boo there. You get the idea. And those are some little tips when you go to work this next pattern. Because the pattern itself, each stitch gets knit twice and the yarn gets wrapped around the stitch, it will tend to enhance or take away any of the twist that's already there. So if you have problems and encounter problems, not just with the next pattern that we do, the herringbone cowl knit in the round, but any other pattern, just try changing what side of the body you have your yarn on, or try changing how you manipulate the yarn if you're using knitting needles, or even which way you wind the ball. You could wind it clockwise if you're working with a plied yarn that is spun counterclockwise. So I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.